with the program. Good evening to one and all.
A very pleasant good evening to each and everyone. Welcome to the final Indaba for 2023, our grand finale of sorts. I'm here, of course, per the usual, your host, Ambassador Reverend Kwame Kamau, African Reparations Minister and Diplomat, and I'm also here with my activist extraordinaire. Brother Shabaka Kambon, and oh, what a finale we have in store for you. Many claim an erroneous claim. It's quite a malicious rumor that the ESC only does programming around emancipation. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. And tonight you'd learn about the spoken word competition as well as a history quiz that is done every year during the month of November, which is African History Month here in Trinidad and Tobago. You'll also learn about, of course, the amazing Kwanzaa market that is coming up this weekend, courtesy, of course, our ESC staff. Following that, we go straight into a very powerful conversation as it relates to the African Reparatory Conference, which was just held in Accra, Ghana, 14th of November to 17th of November. And we have Dr. the Honorable Asha Kambon. I call her a Queen Mother and the First Lady of the Trinidad and Tobago Pan-African Revolution, here to talk about it based on her personal experience, especially from the context of the Emancipation Support Committee's participation. Last but not least,
all right. It seems that Kwame's feed has been cut, and so let me just finish up where he left off until he returns to us. And of course, he was going to say that the last item on our program is the current item idea that is now consuming the imagination of people across the Caribbean. Of course, we're talking about none other than the Venezuela Guyana border controversy. And of course, we're having this discussion, on the eve of a referendum which is about to take place in Venezuela on the subject matter. We'll tell you more about that when we get to that segment, but it's something you will not want to miss. Is something that, as I said, the entire Caribbean is deeply concerned about for many, many reasons. And so that's going to be our show tonight. And perhaps in Kwame's absence, then I will start the first segment. Let me bring in our guest. I wasn't supposed to be the person to start the segment, but let's get that segment going. All right, and we have with us Khadija Daya to talk about this. I mean, beautiful images there, Khadija, of the history quiz and spoken word competition. I'm sure the audience would have been engrossed in those images. Tell me what, let's start off by congratulating, first thanking our sponsor, Republic Bank, and congratulating our winners. Tell us how it went down.
Good evening, Shabaka. After 5 weeks of competition, we have our winners. And Naprima Girls High School has done it again. They are the first school, not the first school to win the competition 3 times, but the first school to get a hat trick. So Naprima Girls, right now they're reigning champs. They have bragging rights. 2021, 2022, and 2023 National African History Quiz winners.
Wow.
And Brazil, even though it's a different student, Brazil RC have bragging rights as well because they have won. They have given us the winner for the National Spoken Word competition. So this year, we created history. The students, the schools created history in 2023.
Yeah, so are you telling me that Brazil won in 2022 as well?
Yes, they did. Zev Hobson Garcia, and this year, his fellow schoolmate Samia Ashby, she won the competition as well with her rendition of Pan in Danger.
You know, one of the things that people say, it takes a really good teacher to be able to prepare the students for this kind of competition. And
Yes.
that, we need to, who was that teacher responsible in Naparima and the one in Brazil?
Naparima is Miss Greenwich, and the spoken word for Brazil is Miss Arthur. So, and as you said, it takes a great teacher, but it also takes a village because the support these young people have via their schoolmates, their friends, and their family members. It's amazing, especially for the spoken word competition. I tell you, Shabaka, everyone comes out. Granny, grandpa, auntie, uncle, the neighbor comes out to help because everyone is helping them with their stage design. Everyone is helping them practice and pretending to be their audience. I mean, it's amazing. And the same thing for the African History Quiz. This year, we introduced a new component, the Lifeline. And everyone is getting involved, everyone is coming out to support the children, and it's just amazing to see how the commission has grown over the years, that now, besides creating history with the schools getting a hat trick and Brazil getting a double, this is the year we had the most schools participating in the competition. We had 22 secondary schools.
Wow.
Yeah, Shabaka, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm just saying that that's a testament to the work that you guys are doing, Khadija, and the excellence with which that competition is run on an annual basis.
Yeah.
Now want to
Yes, of course, it tells how, because when you talk to the students, most of them we don't like history, but we are not, the way how we present the competition, it's in a game format. It's in a tic-tac-toe format.
So history
And
becomes
I didn't hear what you said.
fun. In that context, history becomes fun.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yes, so it's a fun way of presenting serious information. It's a fun way of dissecting the information to give to the students. And also, it's a fun way for them to learn this material at the same time they are learning their schoolwork. They're preparing for exam. When we did the final competition on the 18th, on the 20th, they had exams.
Mm.
Indeed.
And
Now,
when I asked, how are you all, when I asked them, how are you faring with both of it? And they said, Mrs. Time Management. And that's one of the
yeah, and
objectives of the competition as well. We're preparing the students to go out, especially for those who want to go to university, for those who go to university and work at the same time. You
yeah.
need that self management, that time management, and also how to work as a team because of team building now, because most of the students, they're not in the same class. So now that you have students from different classes, how do you come together? How do you create a schedule that is suitable for each member of the team?
Kadisha, let
Life
me ask you,
skills.
in terms of the material, then, because it is not my understanding, it is my understanding that it does not map right on top of what the material from schools. It seems that it extends beyond the material that you would cover in the curriculum in secondary school. But you could, forgive me if I'm wrong.
But what we do try to touch on topics that are covered in the school curriculum. Like one of these students from the winning team, Naprima, last year, she said that she was able to use the material to help her with her SBA.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we do try to work alongside the curriculum to give the children a broader understanding of the topics.
Indeed. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So it's curriculum extra.
Yes.
All right, that's excellent. Excellent,
But,
brother Kamal. We're glad to see you back.
Oh yeah, the technology couldn't keep me away forever, especially
mm,
insofar as I wanted to hear all of
mm,
the juicy tidbits about this really exciting competition, which is televised live via TTT. I want to say a special good night to the management and staff of TTT who have cooperated with us and partnered over the years to ensure that it's not just
mhm.
a local affair and granny and auntie and cousin and nenen coming out, but it is all of Trinidad and Tobago who didn't get a ticket, a front row seat, also getting to participate as well.
Yes.
And of course, they could plan in advance. They're looking and they're strategizing, perhaps in their mind, and they're looking at weak points and they're saying, aha, next year I'm coming and I'm going to take these schools on and hopefully, take the bragging rights and trophy as well. I'm not sure, I was off for a little bit. Were we able to talk about the next exciting topic, which has to do with the Kwanzaa market that is coming up, especially insofar as
Mm.
you have on such an amazing jacket on tonight. I have to ask you, did you get it at a Kwanzaa market of yesteryear, Shabaka? I don't know. But have we touched on that issue of the Kwanzaa market that is coming up, or is that still a topic for us to broach on tonight?
Rennie,
Yeah, so we
that's
haven't touched on that as yet. But before we go there, I just want to give the final results of both competitions. So I said before, Naprima Girls High School have done it again, a hat trick for the National African Spoken competition. Second
congrats.
place, Arena Central Secondary. Third place, first time entrance, Marbella North Secondary. And fourth place, another first time entrance, St. Stephen's College. And for the spoken word, Samia Ashby of Brazil RC. Second place, Emerald Wren of Fable Government Primary. Third, Sakira Bannister of Brazil RC. And fourth, Israel Gibbs of Barataria Anglican.
Okay, so
And
congratulations
just
to
want to
all the
thank,
winners.
yes, the winners.
Congratulations to Naprema on that hat trick. And I want to say not just congratulations to the winners, but to their teachers. We have to
Yes,
salute the teachers.
yes. Everyone that assisted them. And also thank you again to our sponsor, Republic Bank. This is done through the Power to Make a Difference program, and also the TTT. I mean, the crew comes out and they are part of this ESE family. It's really amazing when we go and we tape. They get involved in the competition. They also ask questions. They want copies of the booklets, and it's just a really amazing experience each year.
Excellent. I'm so happy to hear that. And now let's in the time that we have left for this segment, let's turn our attention to the Kwanzaa market. Let people know where they might
So we have the
jacket like this.
at the Kwanzaa market happening this weekend, December the 1st, the 2nd. So for persons originally, yes, it was 3 days this weekend. However, it's just December the 1st and the 2nd, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if you miss shopping at Emancipation Village, or you didn't get enough shopping at Emancipation Village, then you have to come out to the Kwanzaa market. Get all your unique gift items for Christmas. We do have,
and what time it starts? What
at
time
the Queen's Park Savannah Grandstand, Queen's Park Savannah, from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m.
7
So you
p.m.
can, we have all our local delicacies.
Monday and Tuesday. Sorry, the first.
No, Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday. The Friday and Saturday.
Yes,
That's
the
right.
1st and 2nd of December.
Like I can get about Carnival already. Monday and Tuesday. All right, so that's the 1st and 2nd of December, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. That is the Kwanzaa market.
Yes.
For those of you who missed that fantastic market at Emancipation Village in 2023, this is your chance to see some of the things that were there. And of course, keep your eyes out for the neo-African fashion. Thank you, Khadija. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.
And now we're gonna turn our attention to the second item on tonight's program, and of course, we're gonna talk about the participation in the African Union's Reparation Conference with my dear mother, Dr. Asha Kambon. And of course, last week, Kwame, we talked about this conference, and we had Dr. David Commission, Ambassador David Commission, and Dr. Chenzira,
absolutely,
on the program. And so they talked about the issue from the CPAN perspective. And now we get a member of the ESC executive to talk about the experience from the local perspective. And so we're going to welcome Dr. Kambon any minute now.
Asian Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago invites you to the 2023 ESCTT Kwanzaa Market at the Queen's Park Savannah on Friday 1st to 3rd December from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Come enjoy music, food and drinks, samples while you shop for local delicacies, home decor, skincare items, clothing, jewelry, and unique gift items. If you missed shopping at the Emancipation Village this year, here is your chance to get those special niche products. Come to the Kwanzaa Market Friday 1st to 3rd December. For more information, call 292-7288 or 235-5008.
All right, so we're live and alive once again. Welcome to the First Lady of Pan-African Revolution in Trinidad and Tobago, the one and only Dr. Asha Kambon, fresh from your trip from Accra, Ghana, 14th of November to the 17th of November. It was billed, and I've been in a number of chat groups and throughout the continent and the diaspora, and the buzz, the talk of the town, so to speak, proverbially, has been about the rave of this conference. Certainly, we are looking forward to the local perspective. We had two juggernauts of Pan-Africanism here, as we discussed on Wednesday night of the 22nd, Dr. Chenzira Kahina, my Supreme Queen Mother, and then, of course, we had Ambassador David Kamishiong himself, chair of CPAN, speaking to issues relevant. But it would not be complete unless we heard from one of our very own within the ESC, speaking to all of the issues relevant. A very pleasant good night and welcome to Indaba.
Good night, brother. Good night. Good night. And thank you for that warm introduction. Let me just begin before I get into discussion about our participation at this amazing conference. Let me just begin by what shall I say, reiterating our solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Palestine on today, the 29th of November, which is the International Day of Solidarity, UN International Day of Solidarity with Palestinian people. So it's important, one, that we remember that. The second little thing I'd like to remind us is that I just want to give a big shout out to my sister, Into Pearl Springer, who celebrated her birthday about 4 or so days ago. Wonderful sister. We wish her more and more birthdays, more and long life and good health. And then, of course, I have to express our condolences to our brother, Dr. Fergus, who lost one of his family members, and we wish him all the best in coping with that transition. Now to the exciting Accra conference. Let me just put this in my face for a moment. Can everybody see that? That's the symbol to remember for the Accra Conference on Reparations 2023. It was really quite an interesting...
It's quite iconic.
Yeah, very, very interesting moment. One of the things I want to tell us is that Trinidad and Tobago was well respected and well received at the conference. Why? Simply because we are the home of the Pan-Africanists. The conference was held at the Kempinski Hotel, which was like 12 minutes away from the library of George Padmore. And, you know, everyone who got on the stage, who was African from the continent, almost began their discussion by talking about the Pan-Africanists from Trinidad and Tobago. If they weren't calling Padmore's name, they were talking about Ciala, they were talking about our brother Kwame Ture. I mean, that was just the spirit of the conference. It regarded and respected the historical work that brought us to this juncture of being able to talk about reparations. So that was one of the, so we kind of had a head start because there was a lot of love in the room for Trinidad and Tobago. And then we encountered a lot of people from the continent who had come to Trinidad and Tobago for emancipation, not just from the continent, but from other parts of the global diaspora. So there was a second layer of love for Trinidad and Tobago and for the work of the Emancipation Support Committee.
Yeah.
So I think that gave us a kickstart.
Just to interrupt there for one brief second, last week, Dr. Chenzira pointed out that, there were people within the civil society discourse who spoke about their learning about reparations from Indaba and other ESC programs. So I think that's also quite interesting. Young people from the continent, doing their research through the Emancipation Support Committee and the Indaba program as well.
Yes, and the Emancipation website. There was a brother who is now going to be, he has been appointed to chair the next Pan-African conference. And he said he was familiar with us because he went on the website and he'd been reading and checking and looking at all the historical work we had done and so on. So just to say that there was a rich reservoir of goodwill for the Emancipation Support Committee and for Trinidad and Tobago, even before we found ourselves on panel 3, which was reparations in action. And Brother Cambon spoke on that panel. And I'm just going to share with you a few words from what he said. He was expected to present the case of a case study to look at what kind of challenges or successes or opportunities we've had using the Emancipation Support Committee and the Emancipation activities to implement knowledge about reparations. And in doing so, this is what he had to say. He opened his remarks in this way. He said the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago views reparations as an issue of justice at its core. He said it is a demand that former colonizers provide necessary financial and material resources for the peoples of Trinidad and Tobago and African people everywhere to undertake their own economic, social, cultural, and physical development, which had been brutally interrupted and reversed. He continued, he said, there is also deep awareness that reparations must be directed at the undoing of the psychological damage of enslavement and colonialism, which includes repairing relationships with Africa. These initiatives have been ongoing since the Black Power movement of the 1970s, which was strengthened by the Rastafarian movement with its calls for reparation and repatriation. The leadership of the Emancipation Support Committee emerged from NJAC and the Black Power movement. That's the way he began his presentation. And from there, he highlighted 4 areas of work of the organization. The focus of the organization on self-repair, and he looked at issues, and that's where the Indaba program got its pips. He looked at the African History Quiz. He looked at the History Caravan, the mobile exhibitions, the African naming ceremonies for children at birth, and also the renaming ceremonies that have been taking place at secondary schools. He talked about film shows, lectures, discussions, etc. And as I mentioned, there were people in the room interacting around those issues because, for instance, Ambassador Kwarte, who had visited us, was in the room. So, of course, he was saying, yeah, I know about them, of course, and so on. So it was quite an interesting interactive process. Then the other area he looked at was at the Pan-African Festival itself. And there he highlighted 2 areas, the economic development area, of course, that's his area of interest, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Symposium. And then he spoke about what used to be the African Its Diaspora Forum and highlighted some of the people who attended that forum and spoke, such as, of course, giving prominence to Miss Gertrude Mongella, who was the first president of the African Parliament. And of course, that blew some people completely off their chairs because people couldn't believe that we were in touch with her and had brought her to Trinidad and Tobago. And then he spoke about he even mentioned Fela Kuti family, Sean Kuti, who came to Trinidad under that banner. Then he spoke about the more current people-to-people forum and so on. He also highlighted the issues of outreach. And there he spoke about the outreach that we have done through CPAN and outreach to the African Union. So he spoke about the outreach to reach the entire Caribbean, ensuring that Haiti was part of our processes, Costa Rica, the Dutch-speaking territories, and so on, and then work with the African Union. His last area of focus was on advocacy. And there he spoke about the advocacy work that we had to do with the CARICOM Secretariat and with at the anti-apartheid movement in the early days and our work around Haiti and reparations. I think the message he was trying to send, because the challenge at the conference, it was very clear. From the continent, reparations is a top-down issue, except when you are talking about the recapturing of those artifacts and sacred objects, and even human beings, the remains of our ancestors that they have been, robbed and are storing in museums all over London and Germany and here and there all over Europe. That is a bottom-up argument. But the top-down, reparations is still being seen as a top-down process. And I think the point that Brother Cameron was making is that for us in the Caribbean, it has been a bottom-up approach. We have been the ones who pushed our policymakers to accept that, in fact, reparations is a valid and critical component of our decolonization process. and it is a historic argument whose time has come.
Absolutely, absolutely, quite powerful. What was your major takeaway? This is a question that was asked of our beloved guest a week ago. What was your greatest takeaway coming out of this historic conference? There were 7 panels. There were several heads of state. We are talking about the formation of a fund, the formation and the creation of an office as for a special envoy, the creation certainly and the pathway towards a special tribunal is being agitated for between CARICOM and the AU on the world stage, at the UN stage, in terms of addressing and dealing with issues of reparations internationally. So much was said, so much was done within a 3-day frame. First of all, congratulations. It seemed like a Herculean task, quite impossible, but you were able to land it. So congratulations. But what was the biggest takeaway for you? Because you're talking about from, I don't want to say from 1970, because 1970 was in a sense a kind of a peak that started much earlier than that. So we're talking about 50s and 60s all the way to now. I don't know. Certainly, Pan-Africanism continues to breathe life into you, Pan-Africanists. We were jokingly saying to Ambassador Commission last week Wednesday that he seems to be getting younger every time. So it certainly doesn't tell that you were a part of the 1970 Black Power Revolution in Trinidad and Tobago. So some, as it were, 53 years later, here we are pushing the banner forward, pushing the movement forward. You are no newcomer to this. Again, I call you the first lady of the movement in Trinidad and Tobago. What was the greatest takeaway for you coming out of this very historic conference?
Okay, I think for me, one was that there was recognition on the continent that they have work to do. They have to build the movement from the bottom up. You can do all the technical things at the governmental level if the population are not engaged in this struggle for reparations and self-repair. Because remember, that's what we've spent a lot of our time doing. Yes, we've struggled for reparations, but we didn't say, well, we'll wait until somebody gives us something and then we'll see what we can do with it. No, we insisted that what had to take shape was self-repair. We had to find out who we were. We had to do the research. We had to give ourselves the names of our ancestors. We had to commit it to our children. We had to struggle with all the institution building and so on. So it to me, the takeaway was that there was recognition on the continent, both from the activists, the academics, and the policymakers, that in fact, work has to be done on the ground to get our people to be engaged in this self-repair. Because the task of self-repair on the continent is wide and deep. Because colonialism did not just affect us here on this side of the ocean. The colonial grip and the destruction and the structural inequalities and disruptions of our lives occurred on the continent as well. And self-repair has to be a big part there. So I think the recognition of that was, for me, the biggest takeaway.
Question to you really quickly, a follow-up question. Insofar as self-repair, internal reparations, as I call it, for you was greatest takeaway, and clearly there's some recognition, admission on the part of continental Pan-Africanists and reparationists that this is an area that perhaps needs a little more attention. Is that then therefore an amazing opportunity for ESCTT and other Caribbean groups, organizations, nations, and territories to play somewhat of a lead role in terms of, given 53 plus years of experience in this regard, in terms of directing, guiding, facilitating, and encouraging that self-repair process?
Well, I wouldn't like us to become to adopt that position. I don't think so, because I think we've got to be humble. People have to grapple with their own internal crises themselves. The most we can do is share our experiences. And that's why I think they asked Baba and others to speak
That's
about,
it.
present their cases like a case study, And Baba said a case study. This is why, we were grappling with the idea. But when you think that in fact what they want is to understand the what do you call it? The tools, the way in which it was done, so that they too can engage in processes such as this. I think you get a sense of that, and we humbly should offer whatever advice and share whatever experiences we can, so that they can leapfrog, because we don't have to wait nowadays. The technology and everything else allows us to leapfrog. They don't have to go through all that we had to go through to get where we are. They can be beyond us in a moment, and just like the next generation should leapfrog and move. When we talk about resilience, I like to say we have to bounce forward. That's the second thing. Let me just say this quickly and allow you all to move on with the program. The second important takeaway is that it's a very interesting moment historically, because I arrived from Ghana, from just coming from another kind of conference entirely that was looking at issues of climate change, and there they were grappling with establishment of a fund for loss and damage. And here we were in Ghana grappling with the establishment of a fund for reparations. I'll tell you, there's not much difference between the two phenomena. And we are historically at that moment where the issue of justice is being sought in a very, what shall I say? Those who suffer the injustices are seeking the righteousness in a very material way and in a very logical and organized manner. And I think it's an amazing moment to be alive. Young people should be happy that their brains can just explode with the knowledge and the information that's going to happen around them.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, there's a global consensus. The morality of has shifted towards things like reparatory justice, and I think that really,
that's right. That arc of justice that our good brother spoke about, it's certainly bending in the right direction right now.
Let's just say that even while that is happening, there's a groundswell of ideological forces heading in the other direction.
Right.
As exemplified by the election of Geert Wilders in the Netherlands.
Yes.
We're going to leave that there for now. We're going to have a program on that sometime soon.
Yeah.
And the Argentina's results recently as well. Yes.
That's right.
Dr. Cambon for joining us tonight.
What's going on in the world? Yes. Thank you.
We got to to the conversation on the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy. And so just quickly to put things into perspective, over the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 sessions at the Cipriani Labour College. One where, and we have to congratulate the college on bringing those who represented the perspective of the Guyanese government to speak on one occasion, and then on the next occasion, those who represented the position or perspective of the Venezuelan government. Of course, we on Indaba and the Emancipation Support Committee were not in attendance physically, but we attended those events virtually. And tonight, what I'm going to try to do in the brief time that we have is to give people a sense of where the disparities are between the perspectives of both bodies. And of course, we have a special guest between the disparities between both perspectives for the benefit of our listeners. Our listeners are informed listeners, and they want to be informed. And so they come here for a qualitatively different discourse to what pertains in the media. In addition to that, we have with us Brother Felipe Noguera, who's going to join us shortly, if he's not on the inside already. And he represents a regional body that is looking at the issue even beyond the perspectives that were raised by those representing the Guyanese state and those representing the Venezuelan state. Beyond that, let me say that the gentleman who represented Guyana, from the historical perspective. That's Professor Mark Curtin. He has been a guest on Indaba on several occasions. The person who represented Venezuela from the historical perspective, Ambassador His Excellency Alvaro Sanchez, he's been a guest on Indaba on a number of occasions. And so it just tells you that we are involved here in the Emancipation Support Committee deeply in the issues that affect our region, our people across the region. Of course, we see both Guyana and Venezuela as our Caribbean brothers and sisters. Guyana being part of the Caribbean community, that's a political formation, and Venezuela, our neighbor in the Caribbean Sea. And we are concerned about these developments as they impact both territories and, of course, the implications for us here in Trinidad and Tobago and across the rest of the Caribbean. And so let me get right into this material that I want to cover. And it starts off with let's see, where do we begin in this dialogue? We want to go back to the beginning. And of course, the Venezuelans are always going to start with in 1777, where Venezuela was declared a general captaincy by Spain. And from then throughout their independence period, and they had several or three different proclamations of independence, 1810, 1811, and 1819. The Guyana province, that is the land west of from the west bank of the Essequibo River, that was always part of Venezuela. So the Venezuelans will go back to that. The Guyanese are going to start in 1840, 1841, and they're going to make the case that there was the British government sent out a Prussian explorer called Robert Schomburg to draw a map of the area, and he drew the line. He presented a map which included, the territory in question from west of the territory in controversy inside of Guyana, British Guyana at the time. That's in 1841. Both governments will agree that from the time that information came before, the Venezuelan government demanded that the British government remove the posts. They contested the legitimacy of this demarcation, and the Venezuelans will point out that the British government actually removed the posts, which were placed along the Schomburg line, and that, of course, was de facto recognition of the sovereignty of Venezuela over that territory. In 1887, the Venezuelans would have broken off relations with Great Britain, as the latter, they said, disregarded the agreement they came to in 1850 to remove those posts. And here again, we would have a difference between the story of the Guyanese and the story of the Venezuelans. The Guyanese would argue that the Venezuelans went to the United States of America and asked them to help with the arbitration with Great Britain. The Venezuelans argue that they were, in their attempt, in 1895, the U.S. became involved. They don't say exactly how, but by proclaiming the Monroe Doctrine. So the Guyanese are going to say that the Americans, the Venezuelans themselves, ignited the Monroe Doctrine by inviting the Americans. The Venezuelans argue that the Americans became involved in some other way, proclaiming the Monroe Doctrine. The other important factor that both agree on is that the 1897 Treaty of Washington was signed between Britain and the United States of America, and this had a huge part to play in what transpired next. In it, the US and Great Britain exercised, according to the Venezuelans, tremendous pressure against Venezuela and forced it to accept the arbitration under what they call disadvantageous conditions. Uh, the Venezuelans will argue that under these disadvantageous conditions, there was no Venezuelan part of the arbitration commission, and that Venezuela was represented by two Americans. The Guyanese will argue that this is not the case, and there was in fact at least one Venezuelan on the arbitration commission, and of course, as they would argue, the Venezuelans invited the Americans to
Let
be
me ask you to pause. Let me ask you to pause a little, brother Felipe, until you. Oh, beautiful! Thank you so very much. Please proceed, brother Shabaka.
right. At the end of the day, in 1899, the arbitrators would strip Venezuela of 90% of the Essequibo territory. Let me put that differently so that we don't come down on one side or the other. They agreed that 90% of the territory in question would be given over to Guyana. And so what happens then? From 1899 right up until 1962, this matter seems to be non-controversial. The Guyanese will tell you that the Venezuelans agreed to the line. They set up a joint commission with the British to establish the exact line. They would have worked with the Brazilians to establish where the Brazilian borders were, and they were quite content to accept the agreement. Until 1962. And the Guyanese will argue that in 1962, just as Guyana gained independence with a socialist government in power, the imperialists of the region, the main imperialists of the region, would have gotten involved with Venezuela and encouraged Venezuela possibly to raise the issue at that point of independence, to undermine Guyana as they were striding forward into independence. That's what that is the Guyanese position. The Venezuelan position is that going back to 1949, one of the and this is another interesting disagreement. The Venezuelans would argue that a U.S. lawyer called Severo Male Prevost, who the Guyanese claim is a Venezuelan lawyer, would have published a memorandum or written a memorandum, which he asked to be published after he died. And that memorandum, in that memorandum, he would have argued that the Paris arbitrators, that's where the Paris being the place where the arbitration took place, plotted against Venezuela. And as such, in 1962, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Marcos Falcon Briceño denounced this fraudulent settlement of 1899, the arbitral award, before the 17th UN General Assembly. So here again, the two stories agree that the issue came up in the 1940s from this memorandum, but the Guyanese will argue that foreign powers influenced Venezuela to choose in 1962 to use that date, and the Venezuelans would argue that they, for whatever reason, they waited till 62 to bring the issue before the UN General Assembly. At any rate, they both agree that this led to the signing of the Geneva Agreement. I think that was in 1966. And under this agreement, both parties chose to find practical solutions that would be satisfactory to both through bilateral discussions, peaceful bilateral negotiations. Both parties would argue that the other was aggressive or took aggressive approaches during this period. They would then, in 1970, there was the Protocol of Port of Spain, signed here under the leadership of Dr. Eric Williams, where they agreed to freeze negotiations for 12 years. And also in 1987, they decided to bilaterally. So the next step after the Port of Spain agreement, because the Port of Spain agreement would have ended in 1982, with Venezuela not agreeing to continue those negotiations, which didn't seem to be fruitful, Venezuela and Guyana. In 1987, they accepted the good offices method, in which a respected individual agreed to by all parties, appointed by the UN, would serve as a facilitator to the controversy. So from 1987, you had 4 good officers, including Dr. Norman Govan, who was also a regular guest here on Indaba before he passed away. So Dr. Norman Govan, and of course he would have spoken to us about this issue at some point here on Indaba, but Dr. Norman Govan would have been among those 4 respected individuals who was there on behalf of the UN to facilitate some kind of agreement between the 2 parties. Again, the issue would diverge somewhere after that. That would end officially in 2018 with the end of the term of Dag Nylander. He was the last of these good officers. In 2015, though, the Venezuelans would argue that the Guyanese began to participate in a conspiracy against Venezuela. The Guyanese perspective would be that they would have become increasingly frustrated with the pace of negotiations, and they would have called on the Secretary General at the time to use his good office to see if he could advance the process. Venezuela is going to argue that this was just around the time when the United States of America publicly called for regime change in Venezuela. And so just at that moment, the Guyanese government would then make this entreat to the UN Secretary General at the time, and this would add to their difficulties in that moment. They argued that the Guyanese government began to act unilaterally in the dispute, and this would have added to the destabilizing actions that were taking, the destabilizing of Venezuela that was well in gear from that time. And of course, they would point to the fact that the Guyana installed an offshore platform in the maritime border of the Essequibo territory, within waters still awaiting demarcation, in clear violation of the 1966 Geneva Agreement. That's the Venezuelan perspective. In addition, the Guyana government announced in 2015 that ExxonMobil made its famous find in the Liza 1 well, 193 kilometers offshore, with recoverable reserves of 500 million barrels. They would argue that in 2018, the Guyana filed a unilateral claim before the International Court of Justice. The Guyanese perspective is slightly different. They would argue that, frustrated with the pace of change, they approached the UN Secretary General, and that in 2017, the UN Secretary General, or in 2016, the UN Secretary General would have come back to them and said that if things don't move forward, if he can't advance the process, he will come up with a strategy to do so in 2017. Give the process another year from 2016 to 2017. In 2017, it is the UN Secretary General, according to the Guyanese, who proposes that the ICJ become that's the International Court of Justice, to become the body to resolve the controversy between the two parties. Of course, the Venezuelans would then argue that both Guyana and Venezuela are not signatories to the ICJ and therefore should not fall under its jurisdiction. Interestingly enough, we know that there was a time in the past, I think in the 60s, where the Venezuelans would have wanted the ICJ to be involved, and then there was a time in the past as well where the Guyanese sought out the ICJ, and both parties and the Venezuelans didn't want it to go that route, and so it didn't happen. This time, the Venezuelans are arguing that the Guyanese pushed the issue, but the Venezuelans are arguing the Guyanese pushed the issue, but the Guyanese are saying that this impetus comes from the Secretary General himself. These are still matters that we need to investigate ourselves now as a neutral third party in the matter. But the fact that the court is now getting ready to prepare some kind of response in 2024, and that the Venezuelans have refused to participate in the process and to give to present a report on their behalf, I think that has created that is the context in which the issue has come to the fore right now, and what we find is that the Venezuelan government has decided to hold a referendum, which they think will give them, I imagine, a mandate to proceed, with the support of their people to deal with this matter in the way that they see fit. Of course, the Venezuelans have stated repeatedly that they are committed to a peaceful resolution of the matter. Of course, some of the commentators in the region suggest otherwise, but the Venezuelans keep reminding people that they are one of those people in the Caribbean, one of the countries in the region that has been at the front and center of declaring the region a space, a zone of peace, and they're committed to that trajectory, even despite the thing. The Venezuelans have also put forward a real damning allegation against the Guyanese, suggesting, and they use the work of a Guyanese scholar, that is a man called Raphael Trotman, from his book called Destiny to Prosperity, or From Destiny to Prosperity. He claims that ExxonMobil provided the government of Guyana the amount of US $15 million to cover Guyana's legal and solicitors' expenses at the ICJ. So, what the Venezuelans are suggesting is that with this information and with the activities around, the hydrocarbon, the extractive industries, there is a collusion between ExxonMobil and imperial powers, let's say, and the Guyanese government to push this issue at this particular time. And of course, from the Guyanese perspective, they would see this as a situation where all their attempts to have the matter resolved have not been successful. They would argue that they have been the Venezuelan actions from the 60s well into the pre-Chavez era would have been aggressive and would have undermined their economic development. And so they see this as really important to have this matter resolved as quickly as possible. So you have two different perspectives on the issue in terms of history and in terms of the contemporary situation coming together. And here we are, those who love all our Caribbean neighbors, brothers and sisters, trying to find a way to resolve this controversy without it becoming anything near a military battle. Now I want to bring in Brother Felipe Noguera, because he's going to add another element to the dialogue. And of course, I'd be happy for him to comment on anything I've said if he thinks that there's something that we failed to address. Please, Brother Felipe, let us know. But of course, please share the perspective that you and your and activists across the Caribbean have taken with regards to this issue and the work that you guys are doing.
Okay, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. I saw Sister Zakia's email, but I didn't think it would apply to me. So when you called me to ask me to be on the show, I was already in my present attire and on the road. So forgive the ambient noise, but I think it is a very important issue and one perspective that has not been mentioned even by you. And I was surprised because, given your role as a leader of the Crossroads Freedom Project, I thought you might have at least alluded to it. And that is the people who the conquistadores found in 1527, at the first battle. Those are the, you want me to name them? I can name them. I think they should be named. Sorry, this is important. Shabaka, we're talking about the Arawaks, the Carib, Cariña, the Warao, the original inhabitants of the Essequibo, along with the Wapichao, the Arecuna, the Makushi, the Waiwai, the Patamona, the Akawayo in Guyana, and the Kalina Caribs, the Caqueito, Caquetillo, Awauque, Mariche, and Timotocuicas in Venezuela. These are the indigenous people of the Essequibo. These are the people who continue to live there. And they've lived there from the time the conquistadores met them there, and they continue to live there now. And of course, they're very concerned about what's happening. So the position of the Caribbean, Pan-African, and indigenous movement is in this resolution that we have advanced. Now, you've seen a copy. I'm not sure if there's time or opportunity to share it with your listeners or viewers, but it is being endorsed by all of the indigenous people in both Guyana and in Venezuela, as well as in the broader, what we call the Gran Caribe, the broader Caribbean region, because it is very important, as you said, that the Caribbean remain a zone of peace, not only in Haiti, where we strongly oppose any armed intervention outside of the Haitian people's right to self-determination, and in the case of the Essequibo, Guyana and Venezuela have, as you, and I have no issue with all of the historic data that you shared with the audience. It's accurate chronologically. So there has been the only time we see now provocation of conflict is over these resources and at the instigation of the usual suspects. And the issue of the resolution calls for the insistence that the indigenous people and their representatives sit at the table of both mediation, negotiation, and determination of how. Remember, what you also didn't mention, that Venezuela is a country of nearly 30 million people. Guyana has 800,000 people. There are another group of people who I just named, the indigenous people and the Venezuelan and Guyanese who have occupied that territory over the colonial and pre-colonial period, right? And this needs to be when we talk about.
I don't like the word occupied there, but I think they're land rights.
I'm using occupied in the sense,
not
in the sense of Zionist occupation of Gaza. People who actually live there and have lived there even since colonialism, but have managed to make a living there. We don't want to say because they've been living in peace. So this is not what we don't want to see.
And they don't recognize the border. So I think Felipe, you've made a very good point. Let's just touch on that point from it. First, let me salute you for being a real soldier, for coming to Indaba, even at the last minute when you weren't prepared. That's fantastic.
Well, I try to always be prepared. But, I mean, I wasn't properly dressed, but I wasn't prepared.
Okay, right. That's what we're talking about. That is the kind of commitment that we salute. So kudos to you. I think you've raised a very important issue. I want to thank you and the other regional activists who have identified the fact that you have indigenous people now who don't recognize either or any of those borders, who live in that region and who are not being considered, who are not being consulted. Thank you very much for raising that issue, Brother Felipe. I think so that brings me to the next issue, the role of imperialism in the whole thing. And you'll see the role of imperialism first in the drawing of the lines of Venezuela, then the role of imperialism in creating the conflict in the first place with Britain and the independent Venezuela. So independent Venezuela inherits the boundaries of imperialist Spain, and then imperialist Britain decides that those boundaries should be different. That's the second source of confusion. And then if we follow the Guyanese line of argument, it's imperialist North America that decides that to make the issue, the matter an issue in 1962. They encouraged the Venezuelan government to look critically at the arbitral award and to undermine the development of the socialist government in Guyana in '62. And then, of course, once the Venezuelan government becomes a socialist government in under Hugo Chavez, the imperialist forces are then on the side of the Guyanese government, giving them, awarding them money to pursue the matter and the case and so on. So if we look at it from the perspective of the role of imperialism, it's also a very interesting image that we get of the whole matter.
But why I think, sorry to cut you, Shabaka, but why I think this is very important for our listeners, particularly those who live in Trinidad and Tobago, is that we can see Venezuela from many points of this country, particularly in Trinidad. You can see down from Macarif, you can see Venezuela, you can see Macuro. So don't think that if this dispute escalates into conflict, and the reason I said the usual suspects, you said imperialism, is, I just call some places a little far from here, but people will know exactly what I mean. Let's talk about Libya, what happened in Libya. Let's talk about Iraq, Syria, what's going on right now in Gaza. Gaza is not just October 7th retaliation of Hamas. Gaza is also how many 35 trillion cubic feet of gas and oil that they found there. So the usual suspects will go to any lengths to cause confusion so that they can plunder and pillage and help get the population to wipe each other out.
So let me ask you guys a question. One of the things that has come to the fore here is that the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, has approached the Guyanese leader, the prime minister of Guyana, Brother Ali, on a number of occasions. Let me get this correct. His Excellency Irfan Ali, several times in recent times to sit down and talk, and he has refused to do so. What is your take on that? That's this question now.
Well, I think it's very interesting because I like Irfan Ali. I like him. I know his vice president, who was a former president, Bharat Jagdev. I know him personally. I think Irfan is a breath of fresh air. But and because I've heard him on reparations, for example, I've heard him put British journalists in their place when they were fast and out of place. But I think in this case, he is taking the bait of the usual suspects, and he is leading without considering the welfare of his people. He needs to be more open to discussion, mediation, and to consider the issues that I've been talking about in terms of the impact on the environment and on the people who live in the Essequibo. It's so far so good. Okay, now resources are even more scarce, so we're going to suck the last drop of oil out of the earth. All right, that's what they want to do. But if that is what they want to do, the people need to be consulted in what's going on. It should not be a backdoor deal. Now, I have to say, Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm no supporter of any government, but I'll say one thing in terms of how the foreign policy of Trinidad and Tobago has been managed, and I have to commend the managers, the Prime Minister in particular, in terms of how he has been able to manage the conflict between Venezuela and the United States and Guyana. I think that the diplomacy that the government has demonstrated thus far is exemplary. I'm not doing PR for them. They're not paying me for this. I'm telling you this from the standpoint of experience and diplomacy. Trinidad and Tobago has tipped, and he should do it. And he's done it very well and very deftly. And I think we need to understand and support that, because it is the avoidance of war. It is the ability for Trinidad and Tobago to receive resources from Venezuela to receive money from their resources, much against their previously stated policy of complete isolation and sanctions against Venezuela. So the diplomacy that has been demonstrated by Trinidad and Tobago, I think, recommends itself to the rest of Caribbean, not only in Guyana, but even in terms of Haiti, in terms of being able to maintain this zone of peace for our region. Because if war, as I said, breaks out, forget about the Gulf of Paris.
All right, gentlemen, I have in front of me here the questions for the consultative referendum, which is going to take place on December 3rd, which of course, is something that's generating a lot of concern and fear across the Caribbean. I'm going to read these questions to you, and you're going to tell me if you think there's anything in these questions here that suggests a kind of war footing from Venezuela, or anything we should want to discourage Venezuela or the Venezuelan authorities from in these questions. I want to get your feel for it. The first question is, do you agree to reject by all means, in accordance with the law, the line fraudulently imposed by the arbitral award of 1899? All right? And of course, which seeks to dispossess us of this region? That's the first question. Second question, do you support the 1966 Geneva Agreement as the only valid legal instrument to reach a practical and satisfactory solution? Of course, the 66 Agreement, proffers the notion of diplomacy, bilateral diplomacy between the two states.
It also says that no one country can take unilateral action to exploit the resources of the region without the consensus of the other. And if it decides to that, it goes to Article 33 of the United Nations.
Yes, that's correct. Guys, I'm glad you made that point there, Brother Noguera. Very important addition. The third question, do you agree with Venezuela's historical position of not recognizing jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice? The fourth question, do you agree to oppose Guyana's claim to unilaterally dispose of a sea pending delimitation illegally? And fifth question, do you agree with the creation of the state of Guyana Essequibo? And of course, this one I think is the most controversial among the five for a lot of people who are just tuning into the issue. It goes on to say, not just the creation of the state, but the development of an accelerated plan for the comprehensive care of the current and future population of that territory, including, among others, the granting of Venezuelan citizenship and identity cards in accordance with the Geneva Agreement and international law, thus incorporating said state in the map of the Venezuelan territory.
That doesn't sound like a call to arms to me. Venezuelans are like Trinis, I mean, you can see it. Look how many Venis are here. And as soon as they adapt a little bit, you can hardly tell. Hey, what's going on? I said, ¿Qué pasa? ¿Cómo está la cosa? Yeah, ¿cómo está? So Venezuelans don't want no war with Guyana. Come on, you know that. Venezuela don't want no war with Guyana, just like Guyana don't want no war with Venezuela. Let's talk plain talk, bad manners. The only people who want war are the arms dealers and the oil merchants who want to profit from that war. So we, the people, now have to exert and express our voices to ensure that there's no war. We have to make sure that those people who have not been benefiting from the resources, that if there's to be any development of resources, it must be consensual. It cannot be unilateral. And it cannot be unilateral just because Big Brother has his big guns and his big ships and his big oil tankers. That's not how we do business in the Caribbean. And we should not accept it. And no amount of bribery and BS should allow us to accept that. Come on, people.
Yeah, so again, the question in the time that we have remaining, brothers and sisters,
if we don't express ourselves,
what role do we play? I mean, I know, Felipe, first tell people how you are how you're working to bring the indigenous communities in that region into the conversation. Let's start there.
Okay, so the Caribbean, Pan-African and Indigenous Movement. We have a journal that comes out quarterly called Pan-African World. We have been working with the Nagakan Confederation. This is a confederation, a nascent confederation of the indigenous people of the Americas. A group out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Kwajalein, have been working very closely with them and doing some of their helping them with some of their diplomatic work. Meantime, members of our group are from Venezuela and Guyana, and they are working closely with the indigenous people of both countries. And we have put forward a resolution re-emphasizing the Caribbean as a zone of peace and the respect for the rights of the indigenous people, and that any action, any negotiation, any mediation include the indigenous people. But we are also saying that outside forces should not. I mean, I recognize that CARICOM has made a statement in support of Guyana, which, I mean, how could it not? Guyana, I mean, CARICOM's headquarters is based in Georgetown. But Trinidad and Tobago, in contrast, and this is what I'm asking your listeners and viewers and all of us to think about, to the extent that any government is working to maintain the peace of the region, we should support them in our region, right? And to the extent that they're not, we should pressure them to do so. And we have pressure. We have the ability to exert pressure in terms of both mobilization through not only social media, but mass mobilization. We're aware.
Yeah. Well,
and those mobilizations are taking place around the world for other parts of the world. Because we are a zone of peace, we tend to be peaceful, even in our protests. But in this case, it behooves us, Trinidad and Tobago, to make sure that this dispute remains diplomatic and does not get down to the grassroots, because it will be very ugly and it will affect all of us and our children and grandchildren.
Correct. I think
I have a question actually, and it speaks to the whole issue of resolution. I love the analysis; it's been brilliant here on tonight. But as we seek to resolve, as we seek to bring meaningful dispute resolution, there has been talk within, of course, the Pan-African movement for what we refer to as an ABCD of sorts. Of course, Africa, Brazil, CARICOM, and diaspora, ABCD, as proposed, of course, by the Honorable Prime Minister out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The question is, number one, it's a twofold question. Insofar as Venezuela forms part and parcel of the Caribbean Sea, it sure certainly is on the Caribbean Sea. Is it not, of course, time for us to make overtures towards Venezuela in a real and significant way, so that they can join this amazing CARICOM family? That's part one. And then part two is the way that most of our multilateral and international institutions are framed in terms of their structural governance processes. More often than not, civil society and traditional leaders, whether royalty or otherwise, indigenous communities, are not really given the kind of voice, the kind of positioning, the kind of power, the kind of tools that they need to be able to negotiate. More often than not, it is the state actors, some of them laudably so, doing some amazing work, others not so much. So the two-part question: Venezuela joining the CARICOM family on the one hand, so that this can be resolved by way of a CARICOM interventionist strategy. And then part two, even in the governance process of CARICOM, the state actors that are doing all of the leading right now, is that enough? Or is there, of course, a time that we have arrived to, which is now, which says that civil society, and by extension, the indigenous communities and their various leaderships, including the Royal Society, need to play a more significant and fundamental role, of course, in CARICOM?
Yes or no? Yes, Venezuela's time. Venezuela's be embraced. It's already in the Association of Caribbean States. But and Ralph should know. I mean, he would know Petrocaribe was a lifeline to a lot of people. It was also a lifeline to corrupt people in Haiti, but that's a different story. Yes, so Venezuela should be embraced. On the question of the second issue.
But let me just add that Guyana was actually a signatory to Petrocaribe, but Guyana participated in the Petrocaribe agreement.
Yeah, that's before their oil and gas had been discovered or made well known. So we need to continue to maintain those harmonious relations. So however we can do it, diplomatically and otherwise, yes. But sometimes it's not enough, and that comes to your second part of your question. Sometimes it's not enough, and the governments, there's a state. If the governments cannot educate the people, then the people must educate the government. I think, fortunately, at this moment, we have some education, some enlightened action diplomatically in our country in terms of how Venezuela, Guyana should be treated. Our own foreign policy says it, and this is Trinidad and Tobago are very astute. They read the newspapers, they listen to the thing, they follow. So I'm going out on a limb here and saying I find that they're doing a damn good job in how they're managing the diplomacy, but they need the support of the people to be able to, because there is a very, very delicate diplomatic area they're in between the United States and Venezuela, and now with Guyana as a member of CARICOM. So we also, especially because we're so close geographically, we're so close culturally. I mean, one of my grandfathers is from Guyana, another one is from Venezuela. So another one is from Tobago. I mean, or not another one. I had a great grandfather. But the point is, we're all interconnected in this region. And the point about the indigenous is they cannot be forgotten. We cannot be forgotten. Those ancestors of ours and all of us, I'm looking at you, I can see them, right? I can see them. The indigenous people we're talking about for our listeners are not just all looking like Geronimo, you know. A lot of them looking just like us.
Felipe, good point.
We need to be cognizant of that.
Let me deal with the elephant in the room here, guys. In a few days, today's the 29th of November. On the 3rd of December, there's going to be a consultative assembly in Venezuela. At the end of that assembly, the newspapers around the world will announce that Venezuela has decided to reclaim that territory west of the Essequibo, with the contested territory, the territory around which there's the controversy. That is going to create a certain level of panic and concern in the Guyanese population, and it's going to be received in the Caribbean as our brother and sister CARICOM country of Guyana under attack. What happens then?
Come on, Shabaka. This is one of the most brilliant moves Mr. Maduro could have ever done to get unity in his country to back him up. He's on a slippery slope politically. This pulls back Venezuela together. You think Venezolanos son gente bonchera. They like to party. You think they're going to be planning up? Was that a call to arms, those referendum questions? No, it was not. It was a call to get them to back him up in his diplomatic and political stance. He's not going into to send anybody into Essequibo to take over Guyanese. If they offer them passports, if they offer them when they cédula, por favor, right? Big deal. If the Guyanese who are listening, and I know those who are astute know this. This is not a bellicose or belligerent act on the part of Maduro. It's a political act to strengthen his hand in his own country. And inadvertently, the same usual suspects who are pushing him to do this are strengthening him. But that's their business. Our business is to make sure that the dispute does not escalate, is to make sure that we insist on peace, zone of peace, and inclusion of the people who are going to be most directly affected. And I think we are also, as Trinidad and Tobago, citizens and neighbors of Venezuela and Guyana, the closest in the Caribbean. I think we have taken a very principled stand, and we should support that stand as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, whatever our political persuasion is otherwise.
We do have a comment coming in from Dr. Claudius Fergus, who's tuned in wherever he is in the Caribbean right now, and he says that Brother Felipe, you are correct. The indigenous people's intervention could well be the game changer in this long-standing conflict. And so Dr. Fergus sees the role of the indigenous people as critical and important in this matter. That's our own co-host here on Indaba, tuning in from wherever he is online. Thank you, Dr. Cruz.
Appreciate that support. They
So,
tried to count us out, Shabaka. They tried to say that they were extinct. We were extinct. We were exterminated. It's not so. It's not so. And we need
definitely not. That's definitely not the case. And of course,
celebrate.
that we've had that
And another
conversation
thing I
here
have to say for CARICOM,
on a number of
the other thing
occasions.
for CARICOM is because at least CARICOM has supported reparations not only for African enslavement of African people, but also for the genocide that was committed against indigenous people. And I applaud CARICOM on that policy as well.
Of course. Okay, so thank you very much, Brother Noguera, Reverend Kwame Kamau. Here we are at the end of our conversation. Let me just say that what I did tonight, that conversation that I started this segment with, is a preliminary analysis. There could be areas that I missed. There could be something I could have been wrong, on one area or another. This is something that we are now actively investigating. We're actively pursuing the knowledge on the issue, particularly as it relates to history. And that's something that we're going to continue to do. So these are our preliminary contribution to the discussion here, to enlighten our listeners, to bring people into a wider discussion on the issue, a broader discussion. That's our role here on Indaba, and so we feel that we have remained true to our commitment. But this is not the end, but the beginning of this conversation, and we will be back to deal with this subject in greater depth and detail as the situation evolves. Of course, this is the last program of Indaba until closer to the end of the year. We come back somewhere between December 20th and January 1st. And so, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to bring those updates until that time. In the meantime, we're going to go with the position of our dear brother, Felipe Noguera, that the Caribbean remains a zone of peace, that we see not just our brothers and sisters in Guyana, but we see our brothers and sisters in Venezuela as well. And we want this situation to be resolved in a manner that is ultimately beneficial to all parties. And of course, we also here in the Caribbean, right across the Caribbean, are stakeholders in this matter, for better or for worse. And so we will remain vigilant. Brother Kamau, any closing remarks?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for what was a masterclass in bilateral, as it were, trade disputes and conflict history on tonight. Quite powerful. As you said, it is still preliminary. It is your preliminary findings, but it was quite powerful nonetheless. And there were several comments in support of it. With regards to, of course, the languaging that we saw in the referendum, there's a lot of we versus them type of rhetoric there. So it's quite loaded in terms of its approach. I would ask if anybody's listening that be toned down and that there be an approach to dealing with this such that is absolutely going to look for what we would refer to the massaging and the finessing of a situation, a solution, a mediation that is all encompassing and is beneficial to all within the region.
Right.
Certainly, it has been quite a powerful season that we've had. There were many highs and very few lows, if I could think of any at all. Technical glitches here and there happens to everyone, but in this period we've grown closer one with the other, and certainly with our Caribbean region and even the continent, the African continent, and the entire diaspora. There are persons tuned in tonight from Honduras. We say good night to you. Those who are tuned in from the African continent in Ghana, we salute you. Those who are in the US of A tuned in on tonight, those from Jamaica tuned in on tonight. All of the friends and fans and Indaba family that are tuned in, locked on every Wednesday night, and you refuse to be anywhere else. We could not get here, arrive here, reach here without you. So I just want to express my thank you, my commendations, and my profound gratitude again for your human support. With that, we are out of time, but not out of love, not out of faith, certainly not out of words, and certainly not out of a certain, what we would call a commitment, absolute commitment to this Pan-African struggle, which, yes, does include the indigenous struggle as well. We talked about land sovereignty tonight. We talk about indigenous rights tonight. We talk about reparations tonight. And we are talking about reparations also from an internal perspective as well. That self-repair that the Emancipation Support Committee is so famous for worldwide. Again, with those few words, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This has been yet another edition of Indaba, the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee, and certainly tonight, the voice of reparations and the voice of what we would call regional, non-military, peaceful arbitration and mediation of all disputes that can and will ever arise from time to time. I have been yours truly, Ambassador Reverend Kwame Kamau, alongside my co-host tonight, the activist extraordinaire, the people's champion himself, the Crossroads Freedom Project champion and fighter, no less a person than Shabaka Kambon. And of course, it would be remiss of us if we didn't say a special good night again to Dr. Claudius Fergus, was not with us tonight in our final program for this season. Again, we are looking forward to seeing you right here, same time, same place, same channel, very, very soon. But until then, good night, God bless, and goodbye.